I used to draw stars on the wall. Not real stars. They weren't gold or glowing, just red dots over and over. A galaxy of bleeding freckles on the wallpaper made with the broken end of my crayon. Mom said it was wasteful. Dad said it was weird. But I liked them. They helped me count the hours when the sun forgot me, when my name became something too heavy for their mouths. It started with silence. That was the first punishment. They stopped saying my name. Then came the room. They called it the quiet place. It wasn't a room, really, just the space between the walls, the part of the house that breathes but never speaks, the part even light has to crawl through. They shoved me inside like a broom. I cried the first night, loudly. So Dad hammered the door shut, one nail for every syllable of my scream. I watched the heads of the nails blink like silver stars as he pounded them into place. He didn't look at me, not once, just kept hammering, like he was sealing away rot. I became insulation. I became soundproof. I became small enough to forget. Time lost its color in there. It folded in on itself like wet paper. At first I sang to myself, songs I made up, rhymes about clouds and kittens, but my throat got dry and my voice started to stick to the air like dust. My stomach became a drum I couldn't turn off. Every echo in the walls was its beat. Once I felt something crawling on my hand. I let it stay. It was company. Sometimes I heard them laugh outside. Mom and Dad, the new baby, the one they wanted. They named her Lily. I heard them say it over and over, like a charm, like a spell to erase me. When they did open the wall again, it wasn't to feed me. It was because the smell had started leaking through the floorboards. They pulled me out like moldy furniture, like I wasn't bones but garbage. But by then I was already gone. Or maybe I stayed there, curled up inside the drywall like a second skin. Pain doesn't just hurt, it sculpts. Every hunger folded me sharper, every silence carved me thinner. They didn't just kill me. They made something new. I don't float. I crawl. My arms are longer now. My knees bend the wrong way. I drag myself along the beams, through the vents, behind the cabinets. I whisper through the radio when it's storming. I flicker the lights when no one's home. I stain the mirrors, just enough to be almost seen. I am not a ghost. I am an answer. To a question no one asked until it was far too late. I had been asleep for a long time. Sleep isn't peace, though. It's more like drowning, where no one hears you. A quiet ache wrapped in insulation and spider webs. And then I heard her crying. It was small, not loud. The kind of cry you hide in your pillow because you already know no one's coming. That sound pulled me up like a thread through skin. I moved again. My bones whispered through the crawl space. My fingers left streaks behind the wallpaper. My eyes watched her. She sat alone in a corner of the room, hands over her ears while her father screamed about spilled milk. Milk. I died for less. Her mother dragged her by the wrist like a bag of laundry, called her ungrateful, slapped her, locked her in the closet with the light off and the handle gone. That closet used to be mine. I watched her sleep, curled up next to the baseboards. She whispered to the shadows, not afraid, curious. She didn't know my name, but she knew I was there. And she wasn't scared. She was hoping. I showed her the stars, the ones I drew, the ones under the paint. She traced them with her finger and smiled. That was the first time I felt something warm in a long, long time. Then the father hit her again. He dragged her out of bed and left a bruise shaped like the buckle he forgot to take off. She didn't scream. She just stared at the wall, at me, like she was asking, "Will you do something?" So I did. That night I stood over his bed. I placed her crayon on his chest, the same red I used. When he woke up, his fingernails were gone, ripped out one by one, left in a circle around his pillow. He screamed like I used to. The little girl smiled at breakfast the next morning, but it wasn't enough. He didn't stop. They never stop. So I did what they always feared. I came out of the wall. I waited until midnight. She was locked in her room again. I made sure she wouldn't hear. I opened the mother's mouth and filled it with insulation. She choked before she could scream. I painted her face with boiling paint scraped from my old room. She melted like wallpaper left in summer heat. The father ran. They always run, but I filled his ears with static, snapped the bones in his knees like old pencils. I carved my stars into his chest. Every dot a memory, every dot a scream. He begged, called for God, so I gave him something holy. I nailed his hands to the floor and made. I didn't rush. A scream is loud, but a slow whisper that seeps in, lingers, rots. They gave me the silence I died in, so now I give it back, one breath at a time. At night I sang to them, not with melody, but with air, a hiss, like steam escaping the bones of the house, soft enough to question, loud enough to doubt sleep. I watched as Mom paused at the hallway, eyes squinting into shadows, like trying to remember a name she'd buried. Dad lifted the mattress, checked under it. He never checked the walls. They never do, until it's too late. Red began to return, not as blood, but as memory. One dot in the bathtub, a smear on the fridge, a small red fingerprint on Lily's cereal bowl. I left them like breadcrumbs through their denial. Every mark a tiny scream turned inside out. They repainted the hallway, but red is stubborn. It stains like guilt. I turned their clocks backward. Minutes melted, hours folded in on themselves like damp origami. The oven blinked 3:33 forever. Their phones froze on photos that weren't theirs. The baby monitor clicked on and played the lullaby in reverse, like God rewinding the lie of comfort. They sat at the table long after the food cooled, not because they were hungry, but because they were afraid to leave the room. Mom woke up gagging. She ran to the mirror and clawed at her lips. 2 strands of Lily's hair were braided through them, tight and glistening, like threads sewn by guilt. Her screams were muffled, but mine hadn't been. She collapsed against the sink, sobbing red. I left a message in the condensation. You taught me silence. Dad found a folder on his desktop. She was here. Photos, distorted, flickering, wrong. My face pulled into a smear of teeth and static. One image, him, hammering the wall shut. Zoomed in, frame by frame, his hand blurred, but the nail was clear. I watched him delete it, but I watched it reappear, over and over and over. Sleep stopped coming. Every time they closed their eyes, they saw me. Not me as I was, but as the idea of me, as guilt shaped by drywall and decay. Dad stuffed tissues into his ears until the blood soaked through. Mom began to walk, with her back against the wall, like a mouse too afraid to enter the maze. Mom looked into the mirror and saw her own reflection blink out of sync. She blinked. Her reflection didn't. Now the house is quiet. They don't speak. They sit like mannequins in a flooded showroom, still smiling but hollow behind the teeth. They twitch when the floors creak. They flinch at their own reflections because they know what's coming. Tomorrow I won't whisper. Tomorrow I show them. They tried to sleep again. After 8 days of unraveling, they told themselves it was just nightmares, just stress, just something in the air. So I filled the air with me the moment their eyes shut. I entered. Not the room, their heads. I laid beside them like a second skin. I whispered into their teeth. I kissed their eardrums with the sound of fingernails on drywall. They dreamed of the wall, but this time it wasn't empty. It beat like a heart. It breathed. It called their names back in my voice. They woke up, screaming in unison. I didn't need to hide anymore. I stood in the doorway, not broken, not sad, but whole in the way rot becomes part of the structure. They saw me, and they knew. Mom collapsed to her knees, murmured prayers she never said when I begged for food. She cried out my name like it was an apology, but her mouth still smelled of silence, so I peeled her lips open, gently, like turning the pages of a diary that never wrote my name. I filled her mouth with red crayon shavings. You covered my stars. Now you eat them. She tried to run. She made it 3 steps before the floor opened. The old wall, the one they sealed me into, split from under her feet. She fell into it. The space, too small to move in, too dark to see. I sealed it shut behind her, hammered with her heartbeat. 1, 2, 3. Just like she did to me. Dad swung a bat, came at me like I was a burglar instead of a daughter. I caught it with fingers that bent the wrong way. He screamed like he was still the victim, like the weight of the past should have forgiven itself. I forced him to look into the mirror, the one I'd been building in the hallway, a mosaic of shattered glass and rotting photographs of me. I said, "Look what you erased." He begged, tears, snot, apologies like a child caught stealing. So I gave him a gift. I opened his chest with the claw of a hammer and stuffed the photographs inside. Now you can carry me forever. The lights flickered. The house groaned. The stars I'd drawn lit up all at once, bright red veins glowing from beneath the paint. And I stood in the middle of it all, laughing the laugh I never got to laugh in life,